Alright, so pardon the angle, my phone's in my lap while I am driving home from therapy. I also have my maps up, so if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my map. But, I just wanted to get this while it's fresh in my mind. I just got out of therapy, and, I was thinking about the subtle ways in which, children raised by parents with narcissistic personality disorder will be gaslit and not even realize it because it's happening in childhood. So that's like your baseline of reality and relationships, right? So, it's... I wanted to talk about something specific that was an example of gaslighting, I realize now, that happened by my mother with narcissistic personality disorder in my childhood. And so, it was so subtle that I really didn't understand that it was gaslighting. Of course, I didn't know what that word meant. And for this video's sake, if you don't know what gaslighting is this method that abusive individuals use in their relationship to make the person they are abusing wonder if they're crazy, to eradicate all trust the individual has in themselves, right? And so that is the point of gaslighting. It's a process, right? It's not like a one-off. It's not having a disagreement. It's not seeing things differently, right? That's not gaslighting. Gaslighting is intentionally, or even maybe subconsciously, I don't know, because I'm not that person, but it's a method of actions taken against an individual to make them question themselves so they will listen to you more, right? And so my mother did this in many ways, but one particular way I identified today was she would tell me that I had what she called perception issues, which, looking back, is fucking ridiculous. Perception issues. And that was basically her way of describing the fact that I didn't view things the same way as her. So I was clearly wrong and crazy because she has narcissistic personality disorder. So anyone who disagrees with her is just wrong, right? She doesn't ever wonder if she's wrong. She doesn't second guess herself. She just is always right. And anyone who disagrees is fucking just wrong. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no budging. And so I remember too, like the first time I heard her say that was here's a fun story time that you don't realize how fucked up it is until you're out of it. When I was like 15, my mom decided we needed to go to family counseling because I was just out of control. I didn't listen to her. I wasn't anything like her, and she hated it. She hated me, and she wanted to change me. She wanted me to be her perfect little girl, right? So we went to family therapy, and it was just a counselor that we all went to, but she wouldn't let my little brother come. So it was just therapy for me, her, and my father. And she, after like 1 or 2 sessions, she decided that me, my dad, and the therapist or the counselor were all ganging up on her, and so she didn't want to be part of it anymore because no one was respecting her. And then she made my dad leave too because she didn't want us being on the same page, ganging up on her at home. So I did family therapy alone for like multiple sessions until finally, like, I don't know if maybe the counselor said like, hey, this isn't like family therapy anymore, or what. So yeah, that's just like a really good metaphor for like how my childhood was. But in one of the first family therapy sessions, my mother told the counselor that I had perception issues. And the counselor, of course, being like a mental health professional, was like, what do you mean by that? And she had a hell of a time explaining it in a way that didn't sound absolutely ridiculous looking back, basically meaning that I perceive things wrong. And like, that's just crazy, first off, to say to your child, to say that the way they see the world is wrong. And another thing, we're all humans. We all have our own perception, and it is just as valid as everyone else's. Now, doesn't mean that we can't be mistaken or we can't misunderstand things, but our perception is valid. And we have to, when we want to resolve conflict, we have to also realize that as valid as our perception is, so too then is the other person's perception, right? And so conflict resolution is about finding the common ground in both people's perceptions and seeing where the misunderstandings lie, where the confusion is, where the conflict is, and finding a way to come to an agreement and making both people's maps of reality in the situation align, right? And so, I don't know, like, so looking back, you know, I was talking to my therapist, and she was like, that's gaslighting. And I was like, oh, you know, it is gaslighting, like, telling someone that the way they perceive life and reality is wrong. Like, there's no wrong way to view life. Sure, people can be like, I don't know, schizophrenic and maybe see things that other people don't and have a whole different life experience than, you know, the stereotypical or norm. But that doesn't mean they're wrong in the way they see things. It just might mean they maybe need like assistance navigating life in a way that most people don't because they experience it differently. And yeah, so it's just crazy because I integrated this idea that I had a perception issue in life. I integrated it subconsciously for a really long time in my childhood and teenage years, like, because even though before it ever been said in those words, there was obviously all these things in my life that my interactions with my mother always led to me being wrong. I'm wrong. Me, intrinsically, there's something wrong with me. That is the point she wanted to drive home in every conflict we had, that I could not possibly be right because intrinsically there's something wrong with me, therefore I am always wrong, right? And so that's a hell of a thing to beat into your child, like emotionally and verbally. And so, you know, obviously I had this belief subconsciously for a very long time. And so to the point where when it's verbalized in that way, I accept it consciously as well. And I accept that, like, I see things differently and people don't understand me, and it's me that's the problem, because no matter how I communicate with people, people just won't see it the way I see it. And that's like a really devastating attitude to have. It makes you feel isolated and constantly misunderstood. And it's not great to, you know, feel that way, right? So this subtle, like, gaslighting that had been happening my whole life, really. The narcissistic personality disordered person, I believe that their ultimate goal for their victims is to make it so that they don't have to do the work. The victim victimizes and abuses themselves, you know, at least in the parent-child dynamic, or maybe also in the relationship dynamic too. But like, the narcissist they want to work smarter, not harder, you know. Like, if they can get you bullying yourself, beating yourself down, making yourself easy to control, that's great for them, you know. And so even after like years of separation from my abusive parent, I kind of realized now that I had been holding on to this subconscious idea that the way I saw things was wrong, or like against the norm, against the grain. And maybe it is in some spots, you know. I do have what I guess some people consider radical beliefs, but at the same time too, like, there's nothing innately wrong with the way I see life. And just because someone tells me that there's something wrong with the way I see life doesn't make it so, you know? And that's just like a form of gaslighting, because it makes you unsure of yourself. It makes you question what's real, if you're crazy, all this self-doubt that in turn makes you more vulnerable and susceptible to being abused psychologically, because you're so beat down emotionally, mentally, and spiritually that you don't even trust yourself or the way you see life, to the point where, like, I know at least in my own abusive romantic relationship with a person that possibly, or at least has some narcissistic tendencies, to the point where I could be like verbally or even physically abused, and this person would tell me it didn't happen, and I wondered if it really happened, even though it just happened, you know? That's crazy looking back, and I can't believe that I was ever at such a low point. But at the same time too, it makes me really grateful to see where I've come from, you know, how far I have come to being this person who was so psychologically tortured by not only my birth mother, but then by the first man that I really fell in love with and I wanted to have a family with. And so I was so broken by these people that I didn't have any semblance of self. I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know if I could trust my own eyes and ears. Like, and I just it's so sad to me, and when I think about that, there are other people out there that are broken like this, and no one deserves that, really. Like, no one deserves to feel so unsure of themselves just for existing, and I think it's so gross that there are people out there that want to make people feel that way just so they can feel better about themselves, about having control over another person, because they feel so out of control in themselves that it's just such an impossible task. They won't even attempt it. They have to control other people to feel sane. And I think that's sad. I think it's a very sad way of life, and I pity them. I pity those people who won't face their own brokenness, their own pain, their own trauma, and they won't heal, and they just perpetuate the pain in their lives. I feel sad for them, because eventually they're not going to have anyone, instead of strengthening relationships, they'll be burning bridges. And if they are lucky enough to make it to old and gray, they're not going to have people by their side on their deathbed. They're going to die alone, probably. And I feel like that moment before you go is when everyone is probably just more real with themselves than they've ever been, because that's it, right? There's got to be some inner knowing at least when you die from like natural causes, not necessarily like freak accidents or anything, obviously, but I feel like if you live a long life and die from natural causes, there's got to be a point when you know that this is probably your last few moments on earth. And I think that confrontation of life will hit some people very hard, and they will leave under unpleasant circumstances. And I feel sad for them, because I know for me, if I am lucky enough to have a moment of peace like that before my time is up here, I'll look back, and even though, I hope to reach that point in life where I don't have any regret, and where I accept that things happened the way they did, and I did my best no matter what. And I think that's going to bring me peace in my final moments. And I don't think abusers are ever going to get that. And that's very sad. So, yeah, I kind of digressed a bit, but this is about subtle gaslighting and how it's insidious when it's in the parent-child dynamic, because they're teaching you that this is normal. And, when normal is that you're the problem, it sets you up for all kinds of self-esteem issues, obviously, because, what little kid isn't gonna, hate themselves when they think that no one understands them, no one agrees with them, they're always wrong? Who wants to live a life like that, And so it's no surprise I've been, very depressed since I was a child, 12, 13. I was very, suicidally depressed, even though I didn't really even have the word for that. I just knew I didn't want to be alive, and it wasn't that I wanted to hurt myself or kill myself at that point as a child, because I think you kind of have to be exposed to those kind of ideas to accept them. But it's not like an instinctual, natural thing or thought to occur, I think, in a young child's mind. But at that time I just knew I wasn't happy, and I didn't want to be part of this family that I was part of. I didn't want to be living this life as me. I was depressed and passively suicidal. I just didn't know it. And so gaslighting does irreparable damage to people. Questioning your own perception of life will leave you feeling crazy. So I just wanted to point that out. If maybe, this is going to go in my narcissistic abuse recovery playlist on YouTube, so if you're watching these, hopefully this video is a bit helpful for you, and maybe you can use it to point out something in your own life that was done to gaslight you that you didn't realize until you had the wisdom of hindsight to see that, that that's what was happening, that's what the intention, whether conscious or unconscious, was. It was to make it so you didn't trust yourself, so you would listen to someone else on how to be you, which is just crazy to me. I hate mind games, I hate the mental gymnastics of all that, but learning about it makes you a more formidable foe, even if it's not something you're trying to use for tactics. Knowing the enemy's tactics or whatever helps you know how to play defense. So yeah, if you had to go through that and you're still working on finding confidence in your own perceptions of life, just know that the way you see things, it's valid. And valid doesn't mean the objective only truth and the only thing that's right. It just means it exists and it's real and it's okay. It doesn't need to be changed necessarily. And that doesn't mean stop learning and growing. We should always be changing our perspective. But just like validness, like I think I said in another video, sitting in it, in the isness of it. It just is, and experiencing your perspective and giving it permission to be okay to be true, I guess. Validation's a hard one. But yeah, validate your perspective and your emotions, and the more you understand gaslighting, the better your defenses for it. So I hope this can help someone. That would be awesome. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.